the late 1960s, the world experienced this space race, where two powerful nations gathered their best and brightest in an attempt at being the first country to journey beyond the stars and prove their individual and intellectual dominance over the other. The end result wound up setting a benchmark for what mankind could accomplish when they set their differences aside by collectively putting their heads together for the advancement of mankind. Flash forward to about 30-some-odd years, and the video game world was ready for its own race for technology. Only this time around, you had two very powerful companies that were looking to harness CD-based media as a gateway to building bigger and better video games. The end result was these two very powerful companies taking their best and brightest and sticking their heads right up their collective asses. Now, we'll talk all about that in a minute, but first, we need to experience one of the most well-known examples of what happens when you take a game that was basically an experiment from the 1980s and you put it on an early 90s console that was plagued by hardware issues, cheap parts, and internal paranoia. A game so infamous and controversial that it actually spawned a congressional hearing where the effects are still felt to some degree, even today. And of course that means I'm talking about Night Trap on the Sega CD. Now these days people look at Night Trap like it's a cult classic, and typically it's for all the wrong reasons. What reasons are those? We'll pull up a chair, grab a drink, grab some snacks, and let's play some damn games, eh? So basically the story centers around a family of vampires who live in a lakeside house that go around killing groups of teenagers that came over for a weekend slumber party. Evidently someone important must have died because instead of the coppers or the federal BI launching an investigation, Sega of all people decides to get involved by sending in one of their special ops teams to bring these bloodsuckers to justice by monitoring their every move through the house's surveillance system. You play as a nameless, faceless operative sitting in the team's RV, controlling the cameras that are also attached to a series of traps that are scattered throughout the house. All you really have to do here is just switch cameras around until you catch an auger roaming throughout the house. You wait till they get to a certain spot and you trap them before they crash a slumber party. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, it is, because this isn't so much a video game as it is an interactive movie. Now these days people look back at full-motion video games like it was a terrible idea, and they scoff at the notion that back in the day, this was considered to be the future of what video games were supposed to be. But to be fair, when we were kids, it was kind of cool to have an actual human being talking to us and reacting to things that we did using the controller. You also have to listen in on conversations that the family members are having throughout the game. That way you know when they decide to change the access codes to the trap system. Now the traps are set to one of 4 different colors, and if a family member changes the code without you knowing, then the traps won't work and you'll miss out on catching the bad guys. The game starts off with the team's RV pulling up to the house where you're getting briefed by the leader of the Sega Control attack team. And you know you screwed up somewhere in life when your unit name is slang for eating poop. But seriously, the actor does a pretty decent job of laying out the game's storyline and how the controls work. I love the way the Sega Genesis controller is made out to be this all-powerful thing that can control million-dollar technology. Wait a minute. The game takes place during the intro while the tutorial's being explained to me? How the hell would anyone know that for the first time? Let's take a look at this again. If you sit through the entire intro, almost 2 minutes of game time has already gone by, and 10 of the people that you're supposed to be trapping have already broken into the house and gotten away with it. Now, if you look at the video on the left, I'm not touching anything, I'm just letting the game run like normal. Meanwhile, with the video on the right, I just went ahead and skipped the intro, and son of a bitch. 12 seconds in and they're already invading the goddamn house. This is one of the stupidest things I've ever seen in a video game. It's almost like if I played Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, and if I didn't hit the start button fast enough, the game would begin in night mode. Now, as far as graphics go, well, I'll be honest with you, I'm not really sure if I could even call them graphics because you're just watching a bunch of pre-recorded footage. But I can tell you this much, the video quality looks like absolute dog shit. And that's because in layman's terms, the technology for this sort of stuff just wasn't there at that point, and the Sega CD was never designed for this sort of thing to begin with. Now, the concept of full-motion video games have been floating around since at least the mid-1980s, when Nolan Bushnell and Steve Wozniak came up with the idea of making interactive games using VHS tapes. Games like Sewer Shark and Night Trap were written, filmed, and developed, but the system itself never made it out of the prototype stage because the system cost for the customer would have been astronomical back in the day. At this point, word had gotten around the industry that Sony and Nintendo were interested in picking up Sewer Shark for the upcoming PlayStation console they were developing. But once that partnership dissolved, Sega figured that they could beat everybody to the punch, and they basically optioned the entire library for their own console, which sounds great, but once again, Sega CD's hardware was barely capable of running these games, so basically you have a game that looks bad and plays worse. The layout here doesn't help much either, because basically what we've got here is this hideous gray backdrop that leaves nothing to the imagination, and they slapped on video footage that's compressed so badly that it's ready to sing Californication. Everything here in the layout itself is pretty self-explanatory, but the icons suck. It's just a bunch of static images that barely represent what the rooms are supposed to be. But for all the other crap that's going on here, what this game really needed was some sort of an indication, just a little something, to help the player know that there's action happening in a room that you weren't watching. I mean, come on, how does it slip an entire development team's mind to put a yellow box around a square when there's movement and a red box when you miss a capture? Now, some people might try to write these issues off by saying that CD-based technology was still new and the development teams weren't used to the thing, and you know what, you might be kinda right, but the sad reality is that hitching their wagon to full-motion video games was only Exhibit F in an entire alphabet of fuck-ups that Sega was making at that point. Welcome to the next level, my ass. The action inside the videos themselves aren't much of an improvement either. What the hell is this guy's problem? I don't know what they were going for here, but it looks like these augurs downed a bottle of Ambien before they decided to commit a home invasion, and it totally kills the whole vibe for me. Which is kind of sad, because once they're actually chasing the kids around the house, they look scary and intimidating. But that's only after you sit through this, and this, and this, and that.
Oh, stop! Yo, check this out. Black guys drive a car like this. Ding ding. Yeah, but white guys, see, they drive a car like this. It's true. It's true.
The acting for the most part is at least entertaining to watch. I remember as a kid, people made this huge deal out of child actress Dana Plato starring in the lead role as an undercover agent named Kelly. Personally, I feel she did a pretty good job here, and looking back at how things turned out for her, you can't help but feel this tragic air around her every time that she's on camera. The head vampire Victor also played Science Commander Sonak in Star Trek The Motion Picture, who's infamously known for being killed in the transporter accident scene. Horror fans might be surprised to know that one of the vampire's sons, named Jeff, was played by Andreas Jones, who previously played Rick in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. Lieutenant Sims has been in movies like Metal Storm and The Phantom, and he's still picking up roles today, so good on him. Oh yeah, this guy right here, that's the voice of Destro from the G.I. Joe cartoons. The rest of the cast didn't really amount to much, and I don't wonder why.
And how would they do that, Megan?
With a little rat. See, first you put him in a chair with a clown. Ouch! Oh, no, Miss Lisa. That was too tight. And then you find some powder and you put it all over his face. Oh no, Miss Lisa. I can't breathe. Oh, I'll get it. Oh.
Now granted, every encounter is always in the same room at the same time in every single playthrough, which means that if I sat down with a notepad and a pen and I wrote down everything, technically I could capture everybody and pull off a perfect run. But I'm not supposed to be a fucking detective here. Writing down notes would actually be a cool thing if it involved listening to conversations that gave me clues on where the augurs are gonna appear next. Instead, you get stupid shit like this.
What's the matter with you anyway? I don't know. Bored, I guess.
You're bored? Yeah, me too.
Well, that's gonna change pretty soon, huh?
How? Are you gonna put in a different game for me?
Hi, Eddie. Bye, Eddie. Nice of you to drop by, Eddie. Oh, and let us know when you want to die, Eddie.
Wow, what a bunch of assholes.
the trap access code from blue to yellow.
Don't worry, Mom. It's all in the fingers.
Good hunting.
See, this is how easy it is to miss a code change, and if a code change happens and you don't know about it, you're pretty much screwed and you might as well restart the game. The sad thing about having a timer with you is, yeah, it will help you out when you eventually have to start taking notes, but it also stares at you blankly and says, you've wasted this much time playing this game, and you're never gonna get it back. Now this right here is where these sorts of games totally shit the bed. All it really is just a bunch of weird stuff happening in different places, and you're not allowed to watch any of it unfold because everything runs in real time. And that sounds cool on paper, but the end result is that you just wind up doing this convoluted guessing game while you're missing out on the whole storyline. And like I said, the dialogue isn't going to be winning any Hemingway awards anytime soon, but at the very least it is passable enough to where I'm actually interested enough to know what the hell they're talking about. And that's saying a lot, because you know things have gotten stale if you'd rather sit there and watch this shit instead of playing the actual game itself. Once you've made it through the first 20 minutes and switched to the second disc of the game, the shit squad finally gets off its ass and decides to lend a hand, but they don't last very long and then you're off to the final chase. This is the point where the action finally picks up, both in gameplay and in storyline. But once again, you can't watch the damn story wrap itself up because you have to go through a bunch of really fast trap sequences where you bounce around from room to room just to capture the last augurs, and then finally the family members themselves.
What are we going to do with the others?
Don't worry about them. Now, let's go and get that phony.
Now personally, this is the worst part of the game because there's this one section where you literally have a second to trap these idiots in the hallway, and then you have to jump to the bedroom and immediately capture the mother. And I can't begin to count how many times I missed it and had to start all the way over from the beginning.
What the trap?
But it was going to be a surprise.
Thanks.
Now, I'm not trying to dwell on the same thing over and over here because the plot itself isn't half bad, and at the very least, once again, I'm interested in finding out what happens next, but I can't because I'm not allowed to let any of these assholes go. Now, why is that? Because the whole ending of the game is dependent on how many people you trap from start to finish. I mean, yeah, sure, you can miss a couple and not lose the game, but then you won't get the perfect ending. And that right there is one of my biggest pet peeves in video games. Why the hell am I playing all the way through this thing just to have the game tell me, well, you made it, but you didn't do a good enough job, so go back and try it again. Now, I could almost understand things being affected because I didn't trap a family member or if one of the good guys died, but one of the henchmen? Seriously? And there's almost 100 of these bastards running around. Oh, that's cute. We just went ahead and reused scenes and sped up the footage to drag the game out a little bit more. Are you friggin' serious right now? Look at the footage right here. These two take place literally 30 seconds apart from each other. The worst part is that the whole logic behind capturing everyone is completely screwed up too, because there's some scenes where a whole group of bad guys will wander into a room, I'll trap one or two of them and then the rest of them will just run off. So technically that means that I missed one, right? And you can't tell me that they just ran away and tried to break in at a different location, because even I'm not stupid enough to go back into a house after it starts eating my friends.
What's going on around here? You got all these pictures of the girls and that locket.
You'd never understand. Just stay out of it. I'm warning you.
Tony, I'm not afraid of you. I'd like to know what's going on around here.
Not interrupt this.
Once you drop the last vampire down the super fun happy slide, you get one of several endings depending on who you've trapped throughout this entire clusterfuck, and I've got mixed feelings about this one. On one hand, it's really cool that you're totally in control of what ending you get. Now, if you fail to capture one of the family members or rescue one of the girls when they're in trouble, you absolutely should get a lesser ending. But on the other hand, you could trap all the family members and rescue all the girls and still get a lesser ending if you missed out on capturing one of these stupid augurs. And this right here goes back to what I was saying earlier about taking notes and not being able to see what's going on in the other room. So long story short, the only way to get a perfect score is to either take the time to write down every single location and appearance or pop open a strategy guide, and then spend the entire game alternating between staring at a book and staring at a clock. And what a miserable fucking experience that must be. So I guess what Digital Pictures is trying to tell us here is that they spent all this time and effort and money and filmed all these elaborate scenes, and you're not supposed to watch any of them because otherwise you're not going to get the good ending. And that is so ass backwards. Shouldn't I be rewarded for doing a good job by actually getting to see more of the story? See, games like Ninja Gaiden got it right. They start you off with this really good-looking cutscene, and as soon as it ends, bam, that's when the action starts. You want to see more of the story? Okay, fine. Beat the level, and then you're off to the next chapter. This piece of shit, on the other hand, the better you do, the less you know. And apparently there's an hour and a half worth of footage, which is more than what most movies have these days. I mean, shit, you'd think that for all the money that they sunk into this game, they'd want to show off as much as possible, but I guess not. Now, before we wrap this one up and give my final thoughts on this game, it's time for another installment of Covered Up, where we take a look at different box arts of the game throughout the different regions, and I pick which one I like the absolute best of the bunch. So with this one in mind, here we go. Okay, so we got the standard American version that we all grew up on, and we got a buxom blonde who's absolutely astonished at the idea of a red-eyed ninja coming down a flight of steps with a sex collar. I don't know what the story with the three commandos in the corner is, just watching this whole thing unfold. But hey, extra points for the porn stash. Over 1.5 hours of real video. More like 1.5 hours of real shitty video. Next we've got the Sega 32X version. And you know what? The vampire kids look kind of spooky, but I don't know what to say about old Victor there. He looks like he just got done taking the biggest dump in the world. The picture of the augur standing in the woods is actually kind of cool looking. And then, of course, we've got Kelly standing there with her arm out there with that expression on her face. It's almost like she's saying, look at this fucking piece of shit. And then finally we had the Japanese version. We got a girl staring at you, and she looks about as traumatized as I did by the time I was done playing this game. Just a bunch of still images from the game. I mean, the logo Night Trap looks pretty cool. Out of the three, I'd probably have to say that the American version looks the best, because at least it's hand-drawn and it doesn't look half bad. Meanwhile, the other two, they just slapped images from the game and tried to make a collage going. Now, most people like to tear this game down for very obvious reasons, and on one hand, yeah, the game is pretty bad. But on the other hand, after seeing the behind-the-scenes documentary and learning a little bit about the game's history, I did get the impression that the people who made this took a lot of pride in making it, and it did seem like the cast and crew had a lot of fun filming it. I mean, hell, I wish I had as much fun playing the goddamn thing, but that's beyond the point. It just seems like I could chalk most of this game's issues up to being on the Sega CD itself, and most of the times that I do hear people complaining about it, it's from people who have seen, heard, or played it on that particular system. And thanks to hindsight, now you can see the different ports and you can see how the game was originally supposed to be envisioned, and yeah, it all centers around being on the Sega CD. And that right there is what pisses me off the most. It's just pretty much an indicator of how Sega was so laser focused on being the first ones out of the gate and beating Nintendo to the punch with having CD-based technology that they didn't give a rat's ass about what the consumer got at the end of the day. I mean, hell, at the beginning stage, with the original prototypes, they were bursting into flames. And can you imagine the therapy bill right there for some kid who got a Sega CD for Christmas, and if they didn't fix that one, kid wakes up on a Saturday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning and he burns the goddamn house down? How the hell would Sega pay for that one? And I mean, that right there was the first big chink in Sega's armor, and they never ever recovered from it. because the Sega CD was just a glorified add-on that barely worked out, and they focused on full-motion video games where all the really good games got shuffled to the back of the lot. And then, of course, you had the Sega 32X, which everybody thought was a huge rip-off. And don't even get me...
I don't believe what I just saw. Those bloodsuckers just got Lisa, and you had a chance to save her. I put the lives of those girls in your hands, and you screwed up.
Whoa, let's get one thing straight here, asshole. You're the one who put their lives in my hands. So if anybody screwed up here, it's you.
I'm pulling the plug on you before you do any more damage.